When I was young, I thought losing yourself would feel dramatic. I thought it would come with screaming, betrayal, or some unforgettable moment that split your life in two. But at 88, I can tell you the truth. For many women, it happens quietly. It happens in small decisions, small silences, small sacrifices, until one day you wake up and realize the person you used to be has been gone for years. My name is Liba. I'm 88 years old. And if you've ever looked at your own life and wondered, when did I stop being me, then stay with me. Because this isn't just about marriage. It's about identity, belonging, and what it costs to spend a lifetime becoming what everyone else needs. And by the end of this video, I want to share the hardest truth I learned far too late. Love should never require your disappearance. I grew up in a full house, not rich, not glamorous, not peaceful every day either, but full. There were always voices in the kitchen, someone laughing in the next room, someone asking where the sugar was, someone needing help with a button, a meal, a memory, a mood. It wasn't perfect, but in that kind of home, you know who you are. You are someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's helper, someone's comfort, someone people look for when they need something done right. That kind of life gives you more than routine. It gives you identity. It gives you a place in the emotional map of a family. And when you are young, you don't realize how powerful that is. You don't realize how much of your confidence comes from being needed, known, and recognized. You think you're just living. But what you're really building is a sense of self, and that self can be much more fragile than you think. That's what no one told me, and maybe no one told you either, because most people talk about heartbreak as if it only comes from being left. But sometimes the deepest heartbreak comes from staying and slowly disappearing while everybody applauds your sacrifice. And if that sentence hit you in the chest, then you already know this story is not really about me alone. When I got married, I didn't feel like I was losing anything. I felt chosen. I felt hopeful. I believed what many women of my generation were taught to believe, that marriage was not just love, it was purpose, security, respectability, a future. And I wasn't unhappy to begin that future. I truly believed I was stepping into a fuller life. But here is the danger. Sometimes we enter marriage thinking we are adding to who we are, when in reality we are slowly being asked to edit ourselves down. At first it doesn't look dangerous. It looks reasonable. You adjust your habits. You soften your opinions. You become easier to live with. You keep the peace. You stop bringing up the things that seem too small to fight over. And in the beginning, those choices can look like maturity, even wisdom. But there is a line, a very thin line, between compromise and self-erasure. And many women don't realize they cross that line until decades later. I didn't. I thought I was being loving. I thought I was being wise. I thought if I stayed patient long enough, everyone would eventually see me clearly. But life doesn't always reward quiet loyalty the way we think it will. Sometimes it simply gets used to it. And that is one of the hardest truths of old age. What people get used to, they often stop appreciating. I didn't lose myself all at once. That's the part I want you to hear. Because if you're waiting for one giant mistake to explain why you feel so far from yourself now, you may never find it. For me, it happened in pieces. A little less honesty here, a little more silence there, A little more "it's fine" when it wasn't fine. A little more smiling when I felt unseen. A little more shrinking so someone else could stay comfortable. That is how identity disappears. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in 1,000 quiet permissions. You let one thing go because it seems small, then another, until your preferences become negotiable, your feelings become inconvenient, your needs become invisible, and your voice becomes something even you no longer expect to hear. And the cruel part? People may still call you a good wife, a strong woman, a selfless mother, a graceful partner, and maybe you are those things. But deep inside, a different question starts haunting you. Yes, but where did I go? That question doesn't arrive in your 20s. Sometimes it doesn't even arrive in your 40s or 50s. For many women, it arrives late, very late, when the children are grown, when the house is quieter, when your body is slower, when your role is no longer as obvious as it once was. And suddenly, without all the noise around you, you are left alone with one terrifying realization. You have spent years being useful, but not truly known. And there is a loneliness in that which words barely touch. Now let me tell you something that may make some people uncomfortable. Not every marriage that hurts you is abusive. Not every marriage that empties you is cruel. And not every woman who disappears was forced in the obvious way. Sometimes the loss is more subtle than that. Sometimes no one screams at you. No one forbids you from speaking. No one locks the door. But over time, the emotional weather of the relationship teaches you who gets to be fully human and who must remain manageable. And if you have lived long enough, you know exactly what I mean. You learn what tone is acceptable, what truth is too much, what dream is impractical, what pain is dramatic, what boundary is selfish. And slowly, without anyone announcing it, your inner life becomes smaller. Not because you are weak, but because human beings adapt. We adapt to survive relationships. We adapt to keep peace. We adapt to avoid rejection. That is not weakness. That is psychology. That is how many decent, intelligent, loving people lose themselves while trying to keep a home together. And if no one has ever explained your pain in that way before, maybe this is the first time you're realizing that what happened to you was real. Maybe you weren't too sensitive. Maybe you were just slowly disappearing in a way that looked socially acceptable. And that kind of pain is especially dangerous because it rarely gets named. I want to say something to every woman listening who is over 50, over 60, over 70, maybe even over 80. It is not too late to come back to yourself. I know some of you don't believe that because you think identity belongs to the young. You think reinvention belongs to people with more years ahead than behind. But I disagree. At this age, I have learned something very freeing. You do not need a whole new life to reclaim yourself. Sometimes you only need truth. Sometimes you only need to stop lying to yourself about what has hurt you. Sometimes healing begins the moment you say, "That cost me more than I admitted." That sentence can change a life, because the moment you stop minimizing your own pain, you begin to respect yourself again. And self-respect is where identity starts returning, not all at once, but steadily, quietly, honestly. And no, that doesn't always mean leaving a marriage. It doesn't always mean confrontation. It doesn't always mean dramatic rebellion. Sometimes it means something simpler and much harder. It means finally becoming emotionally honest. It means saying, I don't actually like how I've been living. I've made myself too small. I've spent too many years earning love by disappearing. I want what's left of my life to feel like mine. That is wisdom, not bitterness, wisdom. And there is a big difference. Bitterness says, life robbed me. Wisdom says, I finally see clearly. And clarity, even when it comes late, is still a gift. Let me give you something practical, because pain without wisdom just becomes another wound. If you are afraid you have lost yourself in a marriage, a family role, or a lifetime of emotional duty, ask yourself these 5 questions and answer them honestly. First, when was the last time I made a decision that reflected my real self, not just what was easiest for everyone else? Second, do the people closest to me know what I truly feel, or only what I've learned to say? Third, have I confused being needed with being loved? That one is dangerous, because many of us were praised for being useful. But usefulness is not the same as intimacy. Being depended on is not the same as being deeply seen. And if you build your whole identity around being needed, you may wake up one day emotionally starving in a room full of people. Fourth, what part of me have I abandoned to keep peace? Your voice, your creativity, your opinions, your humor, your boundaries, your dreams. Find that part, because it may still be waiting for you. And fifth, if I had 10 honest years left, how would I want to live them? That question matters more than most people realize, because age should not only make us quieter, it should also make us truer. And if your life has become a performance of peace, while your soul is quietly grieving, then perhaps this season of your life is asking for truth, not just endurance. That is practical wisdom, and it can still change the rest of your life. Now I need to tell you the hardest part. Sometimes when you begin to reclaim yourself, not everyone celebrates. Some people like the version of you that never asks for much. Some people felt comfortable with your silence. Some people benefited from your emotional self-abandonment. And when you begin to speak with more truth, more dignity, more self-respect, they may call you different. And they'll be right, because you are. You are becoming visible again. And visibility can feel threatening to people who preferred your quiet obedience. Do not let that scare you, not at this stage of life. At 88, I can tell you something with absolute certainty. Peace that requires pretending is too expensive. Read that again in your heart. Peace that requires pretending is too expensive. If a relationship only works when you are half alive, half honest, half yourself, then what exactly is being preserved? A title, an image, a routine, a history? Those things may matter, but they should not cost you your soul. And if no one has ever given you permission to think that way, then let this be the day you hear it. You are allowed to matter too, even now, especially now. When I look back, I do not regret loving. I do not regret giving. I do not regret the years I spent trying to hold things together. But I do regret how long it took me to understand this. A woman can be devoted and still deserve to remain whole. That is the lesson I wish someone had placed in my hands when I was young. Not rebellion, not selfishness, not hardness. just wholeness. Because love that asks you to disappear is not mature love. It is hunger wearing the clothes of commitment. And once you understand that, you begin to see your life differently. You begin to grieve differently. You begin to forgive differently. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to live whatever time remains with more honesty. That is what I want for you. Not perfection, not revenge, not some fantasy of starting over at 20. I want something deeper than that. I want you to stop abandoning yourself in places where you are trying to be loved. That is a lesson worth learning at 30, at 60, at 88, at any age. So if you've been carrying this quiet ache, this feeling that somewhere along the way, life became all duty and no self, please hear me. You are not too old to come home to yourself. You are not too late. You are not finished. There is still time to live with more truth than fear. There is still time to speak more honestly. There is still time to stop calling self-erasure love. And if this message found you today, maybe that is not an accident. Maybe this is the season of your life where your soul is no longer willing to stay hidden. And maybe that is not a crisis. Maybe that is your return. If this story spoke to something real inside you, I hope you'll stay. Because these are the conversations many people wait too long to have. And before you go, I want to leave you with this question. Have you ever felt like love or family slowly took away a part of who you really were? If so, what part of yourself are you trying to reclaim now? Tell me in the comments, because I have a feeling you're not the only one.